I met Bruce Lee in Washington, D.C. A man named Ed Parker brought him out to my house and said, I want you to meet somebody. He called me up. And at that time, Bruce Lee was not quite as famous. He got more famous after he died. I hate to say it that way, but a lot of people, this is what happens. It takes death so they become real famous. And he was just an average guy like anybody else. He came out the house, we shook hands, and we just sat around the living room like this, talking about the martial arts, the future of the martial arts. And he asked if he could stop by the dojo to train, and he did. He came by the dojo. He came by my school 3 times, and then that's it. He naturally passed away, and but he stopped by my dojo, wanted to spar, and he wanted to fight with some of the students. If you didn't know the thing about Bruce, people say, well, Bruce didn't enter tournaments, but he did. He got discovered for movies by winning kata, first place at Ed Parker's International Championships. And people thought that Bruce Lee didn't like katas. What he said was where he's at now, he doesn't think he needs the kata. But he needed the kata to get where he got to. That's like saying I can learn to write without ever learning to print, or without learning the alphabet. I just want to write. He thought that the kata was the alphabet, the printing, to learn how to write. And that's the way he described it to me at the time. But he got discovered doing kata, and he didn't necessarily enter tournaments because he didn't like the fact that it was one-on-one, and he called it a touch and run game. They go like this, and then somebody goes point, but nobody did anything. He liked to put on gloves and hit you, and he liked to be hit. That was the difference. And he said, if you hit me, then we'll give you a point. If I hit you, we get a point. So he liked his gloves. He liked to make contact, and he didn't like the point and run. And that's one of the reasons he didn't want to enter tournaments. He watched tournaments, but what he was famous for, and this has been written up in a lot of things, he used to go around to different karate schools and go in and fight the students. To him, that was better than a tournament. And he would fight all the students. Now, some of the write-ups made it sound like he was aggressive, and he was not. He was always polite. If he went into Paul Bowman's school, or my school, he did come in my school, but he went into Paul Bowman's school, he didn't ask Paul Bowman to fight. He wouldn't go in and beat up the instructor in front of the students. And some of the articles led you to believe that. He went in and asked if he could spar with your students, you see. And then he would spar with your students, and he did very well with all the students. He beat them up most of the time. Not bad. I mean, it was still point fighting, but he would hit them. And then he would, if you asked him to fight, well, I asked him to fight. That's how it came about. He didn't ask me, I asked him. I said, I want to fight with you, I'll spar. And we sparred. And actually, he's the first man that I've seen that could use his hands, both of them equal. We all strive for that. But I'm just telling you, if he hit you with a left, you weren't sure if it was a right, a left. If he hit you with a right, he'd hit you with either hand, and they both had the same power. And he could kick with either foot, like Superfoot Wallace. I'm sure you heard of him, Bill Wallace. Well, he only has one leg that's real good. Bruce Lee used to be able to do that with both legs. But I went in my fighting stance, and all of a sudden, wow! And back at that point in the martial arts, people didn't kick above here. People really didn't kick high till Bruce Lee. Till he did it in movies. He's the reason we have a Superfoot Wallace. He's the reason we had people kicking high. Because he started it. But he said the hands and feet are equal, we're going to use them the same. So he would kick you, he would punch you. And so I get in my fighting stance, and all of a sudden, pow, his foot hits me upside the head. If you knew him, fantastic, you loved him. If he didn't like you, he let it be known. Some people said he was arrogant. He would show he didn't like you. If he didn't like you, he didn't waste time with you. That's the way it went. He just said, "See you later." He's polite and he'd leave. The quickest, simplest way to get out of a self-defense situation. He made that clear all the time. He would say that if you have a better idea, if you have a better technique, show it to me. And if I like it, I'm going to be doing it. Wally J's the same way. I don't want to say that, but Wally J says the same thing. Wally J, they asked Wally J, you changed that technique a little bit. He says, yeah. He said a car in 1960 and an automobile today in the year 2006 made a lot of changes. And he said that's what Wally told me, but Wally and Bruce had the same philosophy, that you got to change and stay with the time. And if there's a quicker way or a shorter way to put somebody down, then you got to do it. And Bruce was into simplicity. Most people don't. The people that are calling themselves Jeet Kune Do today are making it too complicated. Bruce did not have it complicated. Bruce's philosophy is, if you touch me, I'm going to hit you. And I'm going to hit you hard and fast and often, and you're going to go down. And today, when they teach his art, they say, well, you do this, you touch this, you grab here, you do. He never did any of that. You hit me, I'm hitting you. Bruce used to like to train with other people's students. And he made a little joke afterwards. He says, he said to me, he says, if you go in and beat your students up, they'll quit. Because I think you're going to beat them up next week. He said, if I come in and beat them up, they won't quit. They'll be just glad I'm gone. That was what he'd tell you. So it was real great. He could come in, beat the daylights out of the students, and I'd say, he's gone. We don't have to see him again. Realistic training, realistic fighting, and everything that he wanted to train with had to be able to work in the street. You couldn't give him anything as an idea that was not going to work in a real situation. And if you could give him an idea that worked faster and harder, he was in on it. So he was open-minded. That's what I did like about him. He wasn't as... Some people are so set in their ways with their style that they have tunnel vision. And they can't see left, they can't see right. They want to just go that way. And he actually opened my mind that way, because he wasn't that way. He didn't ask you your style. If you could show him a technique that was going to, like Wally J was jiu-jitsu. Wally J showed him some techniques that worked fast and quick. Bruce Lee did them. He actually not only brought a flavor to action films, everybody's martial arts schools picked up through the 1960s and 70s. I had one of the largest dojos in the United States. I had over 400 students, unheard of back then. Everybody had clubs with 20 and 30. I had 400 students, and a lot of it I owed to Bruce Lee, because people knew I was connected with Bruce or knew him, that type of thing. It was a shame that Bruce died at a young age, because he was going to do more and more in martial arts films back in this country. He only went to China to make the movies because they were cheap and he could get his word out. Then when his word was out and he had enough profit, he wanted to come back here and put it to play. He wanted to have a television show. You remember, well, you wouldn't remember, but there used to be an old TV show called Charlie Chan.
Yeah,
which was a Chinese detective, and he had a #1 and a #2 son. Bruce Lee wanted to do his own television show and redo Charlie Chan, and he wanted to be the #1 son. And when the father got in trouble, Bruce was going to show up and clean him up. Bruce Lee, I got to tell you this, and this is maybe some of the reason he died young. There's another reason behind that, but he pushed himself to the limit. He pushed. The human body can only take so much. He had a drive, and maybe inwardly, maybe he knew he was going to die, but he would constantly do push-ups, sit-ups, grapple with pieces of wood, and on the movie set, when they would take a break, everybody would sit down. People told me Bruce went over and just did push-ups, kept pumping up for the next scene so that he looked strong. He didn't want to look weak. He would give the people problem on the movie set. With the TV show, he gave people problem because he didn't want to do anything that didn't make the martial arts look good. He wouldn't use a springboard. They wanted him to use a springboard and jump up and kick a light in one of the TV shows. In fact, I think it was a movie. And he wouldn't do it. He said, if I can't jump up and kick the light, then we're not breaking that light. And he worked on it, and he worked on it, and he worked on it. And finally, he jumped up and kicked that light bulb out. But he could do it. He did not use a springboard. And martial artists respected him for that because he would not do anything that made the martial arts look bad. We had some telephone conversations when we were together. Well, actually, when we were together in a restaurant, I learned more from Bruce Lee, just sitting there talking, than I did in the dojo. Because in the dojo, you're fighting, you don't learn anything except to put your hands up fast and block. But when you're actually sitting one-on-one, and we talked about some things in the restaurants, then you could learn, you could pick his brain, and you could really learn something. One time I had an instructor named Daniel K. Pai, P-A-I, and Daniel Pai was a very tough person. And Daniel Pai wanted to spar Bruce, and it got a little rough. And I had to separate it. I had to go between them. And that was hard to do because I have Bruce Lee here, and I have my instructor here. And what it amounted to was they kept hitting each other harder and harder. Well, anytime anything come out in the martial arts back then, they would pack into it. Word went around because it's the only thing we had as martial artists. You got to remember back at the time this was all happening, when there was television in the United States, there was only 3 channels. I think over here in England, you only had like 2 channels at the time. Now there's hundreds. You get the satellite, but it was different back then. And so the movies were the answer. You went to the movies. If you were a martial artist, and you even heard somebody threw one kick in the movie, you went to the movie. Because it was the only thing you could have, you could see it. Back then there wasn't videos, there weren't DVDs, there weren't books. You couldn't even get a good book on the martial arts. There were 1 or 2 books, and you'd get them just because they were on the martial arts. But there weren't a lot of books like today. Today there's books on every style, by everybody. There's DVDs, there's everything you want. Now you can almost train at home. You can just plug in a DVD and watch all the big guys teaching. Back then it wasn't the case. You had to learn firsthand, and to learn firsthand you had to go train with the big guys. Muhammad Ali was 6'3", Bruce Lee was 5'7". But I got to tell you this, Muhammad Ali asked me to introduce him to Bruce Lee. One time in a telephone conversation, Bruce Lee asked me to introduce him to Muhammad Ali, because I was training with Muhammad Ali at the time. And Bruce Lee asked, I said, when I come back from China, I got to meet Muhammad Ali, because he's just a fighter. He fights the way I think, he said. And what happened was Bruce never returned that trip. It was caused. And I'm going to put myself on and say it was caused. Yeah, I believe it was a acupuncture needle right up under the back of the skull. There's a pressure point that's up under the skull. That one needle can take somebody out, and I believe it was caused. Everybody, even the wife now believes it. His former wife, everybody believes it now. There was too much money involved. He went and made the movies in China, and he made 10 movies. And in the clause was, in small print, was that if anything happens to Bruce Lee, the money goes to the movie company. What do you think? In Hong Kong, in those days when Hong Kong was the #1 crime city in the world, was the #1 crime city in the world, you can't get somebody done in? Yes, you can. And they got all the money. Mrs. Bruce Lee didn't get any of that money. She didn't get any money till Enter the Dragon was going to be released by Warner Brothers. She was threatening to sue. And they gave her, I understand, some money to shut her up. Just here's some money so we can release the movie. Okay. And I'm not sure of the figure, but I think they gave her $2 million. I'm not sure, but they gave her money. She didn't get any of the money out of Hong Kong. And at the time Bruce Lee died, $100 million came in the bank. $100 million. Back in 1973. Okay. He could hit you with every pound he had. And then his whole trick was he could hit you 4 times faster, and that was his thing. When I first met him, he told me, I can hit you 4 times before you hit me once. And I doubted that. But he did it.
Okay, that's good.
Till the time I got in my stance, he had me hit. So, I mean, that's how fast he was. He got like immortality. It's just his name is known all over the world. I just returned from a trip to China. And he's as famous in China today as he was back in the 70s. If you just even mention his name. I had some pictures of me with Bruce Lee. And they were just wanting them all over the place. So he's just as famous all over the world. I go out and I do some talks, and little children even today know the name Bruce Lee. They don't know anybody else, but they can say, oh, Bruce Lee, yeah. They know Bruce Lee.